I spend a lot of time breaking down complicated situations and concepts and sifting through nonsense to find little nuggets of reason. One thing that has come up a lot and deserves its own breakdown is community. What is a community, and can a broken community be saved? Google tells us that community is 1. A group of people living in the same place or having a particular characteristic in common, or 2. A feeling of fellowship with others as a result of sharing common attitudes, interests, and goals. It sounds simple enough, however, there is a lot of nuance when you start to break down what it is that makes up a community. Online, definition 2 would suit more. Gaming communities, anti-communities, anime communities, scientific communities, all of them have different standards for their members, different rules that you need to abide by to participate. However, not all communities, as you well know, are positive or healthy for yourself or for others. So how do you identify a problematic community, and can such a community be saved? When looking to join a community or create a community, there are 2 main things that you have to ask. What are your standards and what are your expectations? What kind of community do you want to be a part of? What activities do you want to participate in? Once you know that, then it's just about recognizing problematic things that can affect a community so that way you can avoid those things if it's not what you're interested in, or if you're building your own, pitfalls that you can be aware of and avoid. The best way to learn about this, in my opinion, is to look at an extreme example. League of Legends. And can its community be fixed? League of Legends by Riot Games is known as one of the most toxic communities on the internet, and has held that title for over a decade now. The first thing to do is to understand why League is such a problem in the first place. Bear with me, but the quickest way to understand is to have some basic knowledge about the game. A good portion of the toxicity comes from the design of the game itself. League is a game where 5 strangers are put on a team to compete against 5 strangers. The only thing these people have in common is that they're in-game together now and have to work together. I don't know if you know much about people, but at the best of times, humans suck at communication and working together unless given a little bit of time. Luckily, League gives you a whole 1 minute and 44 seconds in the lobby to communicate with your teammates while you pick and ban champions, and depending on those picks, you may or may not have some kind of strategy. Then there's a loading screen, and into the game. This is after they implemented quality of life changes back in 2017. Keep in mind that League is a young adult now and was released in 2009. Like I said, the game has some things in the game itself that lends to a stressful environment. Once upon a time, you had to call your role in chat and hope that someone who was picking before you wouldn't take it, or you were playing in a mode where you didn't have to pick in turns, and people could just instantly lock in whatever champion, no matter what your teammates said or wanted. So you start the game off by competing with your teammates, and not just normal competition, more like a fight to play the game you want to play, or be forced into a game that you don't want to play. Stack that with champions that encourage selfish gameplay. Looking at you, Draven. These key aspects breed and encourage toxic behavior. Oh, it gets worse. Back in the day, there was a role called Attack Damage Carry, or an ADC, which basically was a baby that if the rest of the team worked for them, they would totally win the game when they grew up. The champions in this role were immobile, had little to no utility to help their team or themselves. Their role was to do damage, and they had the expectation set for them that it was the rest of the team's job to set them up for success. They were known as some of the most toxic assholes in the entire player base, because if they didn't get what they wanted, they would blame everyone else for not enabling them. Seriously, these players would flame everyone over like one minion. Ridiculous. Throw on top that League has a competitive ranking system and a professional scene, you may as well just give up now. One last thing that made League horrifying. It had no voice chat. So if you wanted to chat, you had to stop what you were doing in-game and type. And you could type to the enemy team. So if you had something you wanted to say, you really had to mean it. And that was the only way to communicate for a 5-man team working together made up of strangers. Racism and misogyny back in 2009 in the online gaming community was also far worse than it is now, and it's still far from perfect, but, baby steps. This nearly killed the game after so long. New players didn't want to join in, since being new at such a complex game led them to getting flamed right out the gate. Their community was out of control, and it was destroying itself. So the question came, could League of Legends be saved? Being able to identify problems is the first step, at least, to being able to fix those kinds of problems. So if you're thinking about joining a community, or you are part of a community that needs to be fixed, well, if you can recognize the problems like toxicity baked into the activities or the expectations of the group, then you can start to focus on how to remove those things. Is your group based on your common dislike of someone? Is your group expected to attack others? The people in control of those groups need to take a step back and start to shift and change those expectations. Remove topics of conversation that are encouraging this type of behavior and find a more positive ground for people to commiserate over. Let's go back to League and see what steps they've taken to revive their game and save themselves from their own fan base. Working through, you can parse down these issues to 3 things. 1, communication was difficult at best. 2, competing with your teammates. And 3, selfish playstyles. Starting from 3, making adjustments to the gameplay happened. AD carries were made almost impossible to play, so people had to play other things. When they started to bring AD carries back in, they brought them in with more utility like dashes and shields, making them more self-sufficient, and supports were buffed in a way that made them relevant across the map instead of just for babysitting the AD carry. 2, the changes were made to pre-game. You can select 2 preferred roles, and you can show what champ you want to play before the pick and ban phase. It means that people can see the team comp early and come up with ideas, as well as pick for each other, so people are likely to get the champs they want in the role that they want. Plus, if someone who was auto-filled, they didn't get to pick the role they wanted, people are more likely to be sympathetic rather than angry, because it happens to everyone. And number 1, communication was expanded to include pings on the map. Question marks, I'm on my way, falling back. For quick in-game communication, emotes were also added to show off different expressions that also use the same method as pinging. Some of them are super salty looking, but not nearly as bad as having to read typed out racial slurs. These changes have completely changed the League of Legends experience. The last addition that has saved the game was an entirely new level in Ranked, going from 6 ranks to 7, and the player base being mostly in the Bronze and Silver rank, them adding an additional ranking below Bronze to help spread out the players a little bit more by skill level, makes for way more consistent gameplay. It's taken them a lot of time and a lot of work to figure out and implement these changes, and overall they've done a fantastic job. Plus, this isn't the end. There's still things coming down the line to improve the toxicity in their game, partner programs, removing chatting with the enemy team entirely, and lore updates, since that gives players other things to talk about. But I digress. Let's get down to brass tacks. Is it working, and can you apply this to your own communities? Yes, absolutely yes to both of these things. Sorting through problems and being able to recognize them clearly, then brainstorming and working on solutions is not an easy process. You're likely to lose community members along the way. But if you can maintain the integrity of your game or the community and your product, what it is you stand for or stood for, and what you wanted, in the long term, it will do you wonders as a creator and as a community member. Take time out, listen to the people around you, and assess what you can. Is your community based on mutual hatred of a game, a person, a product of some kind? That can be fixed and adjusted, but you have to care enough to be able to look at your product and your community objectively. Good luck, and stay safe out there.